the most knowledgeable of Fed watchers may misunderstand or take for granted. To put the point differently, recall my son's scribbles, discussed in the preface. He just couldn't draw a superhero motion in two different dimensions. To make my argument, challenging the prevailing ideas of Fed independence has required illustrating in 3 and 4 or 5 dimensions the contested spaces where the Federal Reserve makes its policies, separate and together with other actors inside and outside the government, by using technical skill in making value judgments under legal and practical authority. The prevailing conception of Fed independence, I have argued, is just too narrow to tell us much of anything about the Fed, its structure, and its functions. This book's more comprehensive account aims to replace those narrower views. For experts to study central banks, this reconception may provoke a collective yawn. Scholars who view independence according to the Ulysses Punchbowl account, the Fed independence is a legal separation between Fed, especially the Fed chair, and the politicians, especially the president, for purposes of price stability performed by technocratic central bankers, may plead no contest to my accusation that they are missing the whole picture. Their questions and my questions are simply different. They might say substantively, and methodologically, goddamn, to them. I say that I have no quarrel in simplifying assumptions that allow scholars to focus on one part of a complex phenomenon. The problem here is that these simplifying assumptions don't work. When you pick up the end of the Federal Reserve stick, you pick up the other. And the whole Fed stick consists of individuals and institutions inside it, beyond the Fed chair. The welter of outsiders who influence Fed policy beyond the politicians. The large and multiplying number of missions within the Fed's bailiwick beyond inflation prevention. Values beyond technical economics. And the variety of laws, traditions, and other tools available to all to determine the wishes and policy beyond the provisions of the Federal Reserve Act. My hope is that scholars working on the Fed and other governmental institutions who think about independence as an analytical tool will thus find something of value in the more comprehensive approach I've outlined here. But this isn't a book only for scholars. People in general public, including those like young men in the Treasury cash room, are eager but often confused about an institution that influences decisions they make about their families, their jobs, their futures. It's tempting to blame the public for not working harder to understand the Federal Reserve based on information already widely available. But the problem is not just a lack of understanding, it is also a failure of institutional design. We will place a mishmash of separate, sometimes competing committees, committees and individuals within a single institutional framework under a single misleading name, the Fed, and then give the ill-defined framework the task of deciding questions as a varied bank supervision, check clearing, systemic risk regulation, price stability, and employment regulation. It will inevitably see a failure of public governance rather than just bringing the public to the Fed. We must also bring the Fed to the public. Charles Goodhart, a leading scholar of central banking, has described it at best. It is the one of the proper functions of academics regularly to reassess these asses for their assets. Check. And to challenge the legitimacy of value existing institutional arrangements. In this book, I've taken up that cause to explain why some features of institutional arrangements are conducive to, while others are confounding of, interested in this understanding to focus their critiques less on first principles and existential challenges and more on the questions of whether they are best served by the institutional arrangements we have inherited. Perhaps it will also allow those who wonder about the Federal Reserve and the Freemasons to turn their attention to the more profitable enterprises. For those readers, I apologize for burying the ledge. The Freemasons just aren't a part of this story.